are. Chapter 531, What Are We Here For? Chen Guo dreamed about the unrealistic possibility, then looked at Thousand Chance Umbrella's stats, finding it to be rather ordinary. No matter what, the Thousand Chance Umbrella was only a level 50 weapon. It wouldn't shock a player who had seen a level 70 weapon too greatly. Still, the brilliance of it was not in its stats, but rather in its unpredictable nature. Chen Guo knew this well. Okay, let's hurry up and continue leveling now, Yi Shu said. Lord Grimm was currently level 54. Once he reached level 55, the dungeons would be open to him. There were countless level 55 dungeons in Heavenly Domain. On top of that, these dungeons gave more experience than dungeons from the regular servers. Once he reached level 55 and started to run dungeons, his level was bound to skyrocket. Okay, hurry up, Chen Guo said and turned to manage things in Guild Happy in the 10th server. Yi Shu resupplied Lord Grimm a little in the main city. Just as he was leaving for the wilderness, a stream of messages came rushing onto his screen. The alert kept blinking endlessly as the sender continued sending messages. It was none other than Wei Chen, whose windward formation had just been added to Yi Shu's friend list 2 days before. Where are you? What do you want? Come here. Hurry up. Talk to me. Wei Chen burned his Cosmo and a storm of messages came crashing down. Yi Shu read the messages one by one and asked, What do you want? Poison Fang Swamp, location 27,586, 45,866. Hurry up, Wei Chen answered immediately. Level 65 leveling area? Why should I go there? I can't even gain experience points there, Yi Shu spoke. Stop being stupid. Hurry up, Wei Chen yelled out. Yi Shu was helpless. Lord Grimm teleported to the main city nearest to Poison Fang Swamp. Right as he set foot outside of the teleportation circle, a group of players from Herb Garden came running past. Lord Grimm hid off to the side hurriedly. In the Heavenly Domain, the main cities weren't safe areas. It depended on whether the character had any fame in that city. Lord Grimm came to Heavenly Domain when he was only level 50, so he couldn't take any quests. Even killing monsters for him meant overcoming a large level gap. He had no fame to speak of in the main city of level 55 area, let alone the city of the level 65 area. A character gained fame through quests. Without sufficient levels, where could Lord Grimm possibly find quests? Therefore, to Lord Grimm, the current Heavenly Domain didn't have a safe place for him. Thus, a sudden encounter with people of any guild was not to be taken lightly for Yi Shu. Apparently, this group of Herb Garden was too busy rushing to pay attention to their surroundings. They sped off out of the city the moment they stepped out of the teleportation circle. Yi Shu knew that the teleportation circle was too dangerous for him, so he led his character to stay far away from it. Lord Grimm quickly took another route, even though he and the people from Herb Garden were essentially going to the same place. Seeing how rushed the club's people were, Yi Shu was more confident about Wei Chen's purpose for calling him over. Undoubtedly, the field boss in Poison Fang Swamp had respawned. At the same time, Wei Chen's Death's Hand was currently level 60. To advance, he needed level 65 materials. It looked like one of them dropped from the Poison Fang Swamp's field boss. Unlike normal servers, Yi Shu had a much clearer memory of the Heavenly Domain. Even after he became a professional player, Yi Shu still visited the Heavenly Domain for fun from time to time. On top of that, when he became a professional player, the max level hadn't been level 70 yet. During his career so far, Glory had changed the level cap a couple of times, so the professional players had to level their characters up in the Heavenly Domain. Poison Fang Swamp's field boss, Swamp Hunter Leipu, was a hybrid between an assassin and a thief, who lurked unpredictably around Poison Fang Swamp. Of course, unpredictable was an adjective given to the character by the system setting. To the players, every field boss was unpredictable because their spawn location was too random. However, the bosses were always found not long after spawning. Even as Wei Chen was texting Yi Shu, Herb Garden's people were headed towards the scene. Herb Garden wasn't the only one. Just as Lord Grimm was rushing over, the guilds that had arrived already numbered 4. Herb Garden, Misty Castle, Tyrannical Ambition, and Samsara all belonged to clubs. This was truly a close one. Yi Shu have no idea what kind of scheme Wei Chen used this time to gain an advantage over the big guilds. How rare. Looks like Wei Chen really spent a lot of effort on Swamp Hunter Leipu. Yi Shu thought to himself, not daring to lower his guard just yet. He ran towards the location that Wei Chen had provided with incredible speed. He expected the place to be a storm of blades and spells, locked in a fierce battle with the boss as Wei Chen tried to kill the boss before the large guilds arrive. Yi Shu did not expect to find ominous silence when he arrived at 27,586, 45,866. Just as he was planning to ask Wei Chen through a message, the mud splashed in a puddle near him. A dirty poisonous fly jumped up, lunging toward Lord Grimm with its stinger exposed. What extraordinary reflexes Yi Shu had. Without even closing the chat window, he tapped out the command. With a silvery flash, Thousand Chance umbrella folded into its sword form. With a sword draw, the fly was smacked down out of the air. Without any hesitation, the fly flapped its wings, flying back towards Yi Shu right after it landed. These kinds of monsters in Poison Fang Swamp held the #1 position on the list of least favorite monsters in Glory. Their small size and quick movements, as well as their tendency to hide in the swamp, made it hard to kill for any class. Because of this, Poison Fang Swamp was one of the most disliked leveling areas in the entire game. Still, in front of a god like Yi Shu, what could a lowly monster do? Although the fly got back into the air pretty quickly, Lord Grimm's sword was faster. Yi Shu didn't even bother using the Thousand Chance umbrella's stats enhancement. With his bare hands, he slapped the fly until it turned into a corpse. Excellent skill, a voice rang out nearby. The owner of the voice was none other than Wei Chen himself. Based on his muddy equipment, Wei Chen looked as if he had just stepped out of a mud puddle. "Where's the boss?" Yi Shu asked. "There, be careful," Wei Chen warned. "How can I be careful?" Yi Shu retorted. They were already deep inside Poison Fang Swamp. Mud puddles of all sizes peppered the map. Even if one knew which puddle hid poisonous flies, avoiding encounters were still impossible. "TCH, and you call yourself a god?" Useless, Wei Chen's windward formation led the way. He fished something out of his pocket, lit it, and threw it onto the ground. A thin blue smoke rippled out into the surroundings. Everywhere it went, poisonous flies jumped out of the mud like frightened birds and flew away. Yi Shu wanted to use an insect-repelling smoke, but that was a level 70 item. This was where Wei Chen had lost his standards, using such an avoidable thing to label Yi Shu as useless. They didn't walk far from the location provided by Wei Chen. When Yi Shu saw that Wei Chen had actually bothered to come personally, an ominous feeling rose in Yi Shu's heart. "How could you walk away from the boss? You're not going to tell me you don't have any plans in mind?" Yi Shu questioned. "As expected of a god. Looks like you are crafty enough to foresee my clever scheme," Wei Chen praised. "What's the situation now?" Yi Shu asked. 5 guilds have already arrived. No one has dared to make a move yet. They're all still scheming," Wei Chen said. "What's your plan?" Yi Shu continued. "My plan was to wait for you to arrive. That was all I had thought up. Now that you're here, we can start to plan the next step. Come on, don't be shy." Wei Chen's windward formation stepped around a few trees, finally stopped, and called Yi Shu over. Lord Grimm walked over and saw a group of people with familiar IDs. They appeared to be the group that had fought with him just a few days before. Yi Shu greeted the group causally and the group returned the greetings. There were no noteworthy feelings involved. Everyone was facing forward. What was happening in the front then? Yi Shu turned Lord Grimm's camera and found himself immediately outraged. There were the players from all the big guilds in the front. Swamp Hunter Leipu wasn't even in sight. What was in sight was the wall of people built by the guilds that surrounded Swamp Hunter Leipu. They were so far out that it would be completely logically to call themselves spectators. Yet here Yi Shu thought Wei Chen had grasped some advantage. Based on the current situation, they would call themselves lucky if the guilds didn't start attacking them as kill stealers. "Are you here to kill the boss, or are you here just as a kill stealer?" Yi Shu was starting to doubt Wei Chen's motivation. He felt he had need to clarify this question. "Kill steal? Shameless. As a god, do you still have any standard? How could you possibly think of kill stealing? Of course we're here for the boss. Unless we truly can't kill the boss, then maybe we'll resort to kill stealing," Wei Chen retorted. "With this sort of situation? Please, teach me how to kill the boss," Yi Shu ridiculed. "No. You should teach me. Let your despicableness help me, Wei Chen answered sincerely. How about all of you go out and run around naked? That should draw everyone's attention. Then I'll sneak in and kill the boss with one strike. What do you think about it? Yishu asked. Running around with no equipment is no problem. The problem is how are you going to insta-kill the boss? Wei Chen replied with a question. I have my ways. You can lead your people to run around naked now, Yishu answered. Wait a moment. Let's check on the status of the others first, Wei Chen agreed. You've been here for a while now. Are you done yet? Yishu was starting to feel a little exasperated. The situation is constantly changing. Look. A new guild arrived just now, Wei Chen continued. I saw 4 on my way here, Yishu added. Are they the same as the ones before us? Wei Chen asked. 2 of them aren't, Yishu replied. So, 8 guilds are already here. Awesome. I say why don't we head back first? Wei Chen suggested. You should have done that a long while ago. In the end, despite what they said, their characters didn't move backwards half an inch. As a matter of fact, they even stepped forward a little to grasp the situation more clearly. F*CK, can't you lower yourself a little? Don't expose your ID. Your name is like SH*T these days. It attracts flies, Wei Chen cursed. Hello, fly, Yishu said to Wei Chen. Chapter 532 A Peaceful Way. In Poison Fang Swamp, players from Herb Garden, Misty Castle, Tyrannical Ambition, Samsara, Excellent Dynasty, Blue Brook Guild, Blossom Valley, and Void Walk wandered around on high alert. The guilds had discovered the boss at different times. The first guild to see the boss wasn't stupid, but they couldn't kill the boss in time. After the other guilds noticed the boss, the first guild immediately gave up on attacking the boss and the situation resulted in a deadlock. None of the 8 guilds dared to act rashly. They were naturally waiting for their guild leaders to make a decision. A level 65 wild boss wasn't a small matter. The guild leaders personally set out to handle it. When the 8 guild leaders gathered together, they felt somewhat awkward. Even though they were still competitors, everyone had gotten closer due to recent events. The guild leaders had even assembled the day before to curse at Lord Grimm's appearance in the 10th server. Now, they had assembled again, but this time, instead of fighting shoulder to shoulder, they would be at each other's throats. Although the guild leaders knew this would happen, it still felt a bit uncomfortable. In the end, allying together to deal with Lord Grimm was a completely different matter. A friend in need is a friend indeed. They had suffered whenever they encountered Lord Grimm. This shared suffering cultivated a feeling similar to working together to take advantage of another. That B***starred Lord Grimm isn't going to come over and make a mess, is he? Someone saw a familiar crowd gather and couldn't help but bring up Lord Grimm. When he said this, the others gave expressions of approval. I just looked. Lord Grimm is online. We have to defend against him. That guy just returned from snatching the Aquamarine Knight in the 10th server. It seems like today, it's very likely that he's fixed his attention on our swamp hunter Leipu. In the 10th server, he has a guild. Over here. Lulan / someone suggested. Even if he doesn't try and steal the boss, he might go scrap picking with his comrade Deception again, another person guessed. We must take precautions. After discussing it, everyone nodded their heads. They had reached a consensus in regards to Lord Grimm. However, their friendly and peaceful discussion had come to an end. Once they reached an agreement on the issue with regards to Lord Grimm, everyone was in an awkward situation again. Should we scout around the perimeters to see if Lord Grimm is here? Someone proposed. This proposal was unanimously agreed upon and the mood became harmonious again. At this moment, Blue Brook Guild's leader Changing Spring couldn't hold it in anymore and stood out. Everyone, is there any point in lying to ourselves? The discussion immediately fell silent. Indeed, they were talking and talking, avoiding the issue of stealing the boss and using Lord Grimm to keep the peace. It was certainly somewhat deceitful. Even if they allied together to face Lord Grimm, they had to face the boss eventually. Not just today either. Fighting bosses was one way for the guilds to compete against each other. Now that Changing Spring had directly burst the bubble, the other guild leaders felt somewhat embarrassed. Tyrannical Ambitions Zhang Yu stood out. Everyone, Changing Spring is correct. We can't deceive ourselves, but I think everyone understands our current feelings. With such a strong opponent, disputes between each other will give our opponent an opportunity. I have a proposal. For this boss, how about we find a peaceful way of resolving the situation? A peaceful way. After these words came out, many of them objected. This was because in the history of fighting for bosses, a peaceful way was a phrase used too many times. Whenever it was proposed, people would use it as a cover-up for darker schemes. Nowadays, everyone had developed a resistance to these words. To everyone, the words, a peaceful way, was the same as, I'm about to have a go at it. An experienced guild leader like Zhang Yu understood this. He immediately followed up, a peaceful way sounds like a joke, no? Ha ha, but I believe everyone understands the logic behind what I'm saying. Today, the reason we're able to take this step is because of a prerequisite. Lord Grimm, Heavenly Justice. I doubt anyone wants to see these two grow. Right now, if we go into a large battle over a boss, we'll only be giving them more and more opportunities. In particular, we don't know if they already have the strength to infiltrate into our ranks. When we compete, we don't know if their people will turn around and stab us in the backs. Quote. Then tell us, what peaceful way do we have? Blossom Valley's guild leader Blooming Blossom asked. Zhang Yu smiled, fight. We'll still have to fight, but we won't have to fight such a large battle. We'll go to the arena, fight a few rounds, and determine who the boss belongs to. How about it? Not a bad idea. I agree, Changing Spring said. It's not like we haven't heard of this method before, but who can guarantee that the losers won't go back on their word and use this tactic to get rid of an opponent? Misty Castle's Misty Lock said in an unhappy manner. It seems like he had fallen for this type of trick before. At worst, we can record our agreement and post it online. We can have the people on the internet supervise it. I don't think anyone will feel wrong doing that, Zhang Yu said. These club guilds placed a great amount of importance on their reputations. If everyone could see the agreement, no one would go back on their word. Once Zhang Yu said this, no one else spoke up. In the end, Zhang Yu added, in order to stop anyone from harboring ill intentions, the guilds who lose in the arena will protect the winner to prevent anyone from disturbing them. How about it? Everyone listened. This was to stop anyone from sending out open accounts to cause a disturbance. If everyone supervised the entire battle, that plan wouldn't work. Does anyone have any objections? Zhang Yu asked. I accept, Misty Lock said. If this really works, then I suggest we do the same every time. That way, we can walk towards a positive form of competition. We won't need to keep plotting schemes all day and simply compete with strength. I also accept, Blooming Blossom nodded his head. I also accepted, Voidwalk's West Riding Wind said. It wasn't without reason that these three happily accepted, because compared to the three great guilds and even the recently declining Excellent Dynasty, their strength was somewhat lacking. In a competition for bosses, they rarely won, usually in the case that they noticed the boss first and killed it before the others found out. As soon as another guild contested it, they had little confidence in winning. However, with Zhang Yu's suggestion, it would be a PvP between elite teams. Their overall strength couldn't be compared to those guilds, but their elite teams weren't any weaker. Compared to a contest of overall strength, they had a greater chance of winning. Moreover, if this became the norm, everyone would only need to focus on strengthening their elite teams, which would require a lot less resources. After all, to get strong equipment for a few characters, whether they had 1,000 resources or 5,000 resources, didn't matter too much because they wouldn't even need to use 100 resources. Those three guilds didn't object. At this moment, Samsara's guild leader 3 World 6 Paths questioned, how are we going to determine the winners in the arena? Individual competition? Group arena? Team competition? Or war? There were several different modes in PvP that the players could freely choose from. Unlike pro competitions, the group arena didn't necessarily have to be 3v3, nor did the team competition have to be 5v5 with one sub. In Glory, the numbers could be decided by the players. When one side had more than 10 players, it wouldn't be called a team competition anymore, but a battlefield. A 100v100 battle would be called a war. The pro scene definitely couldn't play these modes. Have a team train 100 pro players? That would be insane. Okay, like 3 Worlds said, what mode should we use? Zhang Yu asked. We're all under the clubs, so we should just do it according to the pro rules, 3 Worlds 6 Paths answered immediately. He wouldn't agree to a war. If the scale became larger, then overall strength would become more important. He was afraid Zhang Yu had thought of this, which was why he had intentionally proposed the idea. Misty Lock, West Riding Wind, and Blooming Blossom naturally stood with 3 World 6 Paths suggestion. They hadn't asked about it before because they hadn't thought of it. As soon as 3 Worlds made a suggestion, they immediately supported his idea. I have no objections. What about everyone else? Zhang Yu didn't hesitate to reply. Herb Garden, Blue Brook Guild, and Excellent Dynasty remained. This type of method forced them to give up their advantage. It would put them on equal footing as the other guilds. Tyrannical Ambition might agree, but the others might not. Among these 3, Changing Spring was the first to accept Zhang Yu's proposal and didn't immediately express his approval. The other 2 saw this and also approved, seeing the general trend. However, the 2 guilds only said, "Then I guess I'll go with it for now." Their words implied that they would do it this time, but whether or not they continued doing this in the future would depend on the situation. Chapter 533, If there aren't any opportunities, create your own. This time, the guild leaders personally led the teams to fight for the boss, so they didn't need to go through the trouble and open up a discussion group outside of the game. Everyone gathered together in the middle of the circle and quickly came to an agreement. It was too bad for Yishu and Wei Chen said. The 2 pro-level players couldn't see or hear anything. They shamelessly snuck into the circle and tried to eavesdrop, but the guilds suddenly stopped moving. They clearly weren't going to fight the boss and were still negotiating with each other. How boring. What's there to talk about? In the end, they'll each have their own plans. Such a waste of time, Wei Chen spoke in an unhappy voice. It seems a bit different this time, Yishu said. How? Normally, the negotiations are a part of their plan. They should have already begun dispatching their troops by now. However, look at their troops. No one is moving. There haven't been any ambushes or any reinforcements arriving. Doesn't this look like a real negotiation? Yishu said. No way. They've been fighting for so many years. Why would they suddenly have a change in heart? Wei Chen didn't believe it. The 2 continued guessing. The discussion between the 8 guild leaders finally concluded. In the end, they went with Zhang Yu's suggestion. The top guilds, like Herb Garden and Excellent Dynasty, left room for discussion in the future though. The slightly less powerful guilds, like Misty Castle and Blossom Valley, hoped this plan would pave the path for future conflicts. After drawing up their new plan, the 8 guilds immediately signed an agreement and had the public be the judges. Then, they made an announcement in their respective guild forums, as well as their guild's webpage as proof. After making the arrangements, everyone returned to the game and prepared to enter the arena to decide who the boss would belong to. Chen Guo had her materials displayed out on the streets. She didn't even need to be at her keyboard to do this, so she wasn't busy right now. From time to time, she would go back to the game and take a look, but most of the time, she was browsing forums. A post suddenly caught her eye. Something about 8 guilds and proof. It all seemed very grand. Chen Guo clicked on it and suddenly felt like she was in a dream. It can't be a coincidence, right? Chen Guo mumbled. She didn't have much to do and Yishu was no longer on the equipment editor, so she would see what Yishu was up to from time to time. Yishu had received a call to go to Poison Fang Swamp and went to check out the wild boss with Wei Chen's gang. She didn't have any urgent matters to take care of, so she had even hesitated on whether or not she should join them. Before she could make a decision, she noticed the post. Hey, look at this, Chen Guo called for Yishu. Yishu turned his head in a bored manner, but when his gaze hit Chen Guo's screen, he immediately stared blankly for a moment, before quickly reading the content of the post more carefully. At the same time, the 8 guilds had already begun to move. Yishu heard Wei Chen say, "Huh? What's going on? Why are they leaving?" Yishu's gaze returned to his computer and saw the 8 guilds begin to move. The guilds had made an agreement and began to disperse. We have to go back too. Yishu saw their movements and knew it would be difficult for them to hide, especially with Wei Chen's bros. Their skill level was only average and they definitely weren't good enough to deal with this situation. You just worry about yourself, Yishu heard Wei Chen say in delight. Yishu turned his camera around to look and was left completely speechless. Wei Chen's windward formation led 2 teams of players. At this moment, they had put on their guild tags, all from big guilds. Wei Chen's windward formation was from Blue Brook Guild, as well as 3 others. Apart from them, there were tags from Herb Garden, Tyrannical Ambition, Excellent Dynasty. All 20 of them had tags from the 8 guilds. He's in the mountain there. Deep in the clouds somewhere, Wei Chen recited and chuckled. Clearly, nothing could serve as better protection than a guild tag in their situation. Let alone lesser-known guilds, no one knew everyone in their own guilds. Stop acting as if you're cultured. If you're so good at reading, hurry up and check the forums, Yishu said, and then had Lord Grim retreat. The forums. Why, Wei Chen saw Lord Grim had already run away, so he typed it out. These guilds actually came to an agreement on something this time, Yishu said. What type of agreement? Wei Chen asked. A peaceful solution, Yishu said. F***ck, no way, Wei Chen doubted. He had wanted to steal a boss from the big guild's mouths, and there was only one way to do it, to take advantage of a crisis. The more chaotic the battle was, the more numerous the opportunities, but if they decided on a peaceful solution, then how was he supposed to cause a ruckus? Wei Chen told his bros to hurry and hide. At the same time, he reminded them to avoid players from their guilds. A word bubble appeared above his head, and then he left the game to look at the forums. The post had a lot of stickies on it, so Wei Chen easily noticed it. He opened it and skimmed through the contents. He quickly returned to the game and let out a few curses in his private chat window with Lord Grim. ********, you're plain bad luck. Brother, why do you say that? Yishu replied. Stop pretending. Wei Chen was furious. The 8 guilds made a post as proof and didn't say much about it, but Yishu and Wei Chen could figure out the reason. If he could figure it out, Yishu had most definitely figured it out too. He might be older than Yishu by a few years, but they had the same experience in terms of glory. Why did these 8 guilds suddenly come up with a peaceful way after so many years of fighting and scheming with each other? All because of the pressure from Yishu. Even though they always felt like Yishu should be powerless as a single individual, this single individual had made them suffer losses who knew how many times. So what if he was just an individual? He was constantly a source of their misfortune. How could they ignore him as an opponent simply because he was a single individual? Against such a strong foe, the guilds didn't dare expose any openings, especially after the Wilderness Town fiasco. This individual had picked up a few friends. Deception and heavenly justice, with such powerful helpers, how could he be considered powerless? Wei Chen was just about to loot a burning house, but because of Yishu's existence, the fire disappeared. What could that be called other than a robbery? Wei Chen wasn't some powerful manager. For him, let alone killing a wild boss, just seeing one wasn't easy. If not, why would he not have any materials? Why else would his death's hand still only be level 60 after all these years? This time, a rare opportunity came, but because of a reason like this, the opportunity vanished like thin air. Wei Chen wanted to murder Yishu right now. Don't be anxious. Seeing how dirty your 2 teams are playing, let me think of something, Yishu said. Don't tell me to attack them directly and stir up trouble. We're too low-leveled. Everyone present is a core elite. To tell you the truth, I'm afraid they've already seen through our guild tags. If you do that type of method, we'll easily be spotted, Wei Chen said. Timing and method are important in stirring up trouble. Your method is too direct. We can be a bit more clever. For example, they'll be organizing their experts to fight in the arena. They'll definitely be taking the top players from their guilds, so we can act while they're not there. Moreover, we don't have to directly attack them. We can send in a poisonous worm or take the chance to attack the boss. In any case, they'll have a lot to deal with, Yishu said. Maybe we can announce the boss to the world, Wei Chen said. We can do that too. However, if the 8 guilds have already publicly announced it, the 8 guilds will have allied together. Who has the strength to compete with them now? Yishu said. Don't say it like that. We're going to have to do it, Wei Chen said. Right, I forgot, Yishu replied. The things you talked about are possible, Wei Chen began thinking. If they've made the post, then they must have welcome people to come watch as proof. It should be obvious when they fight the boss. We can begin then. We can make our arrangements now, Yishu said. Yes, I'll get busy. This senior will gather a bunch of poisonous worms to receive these young masters, Wei Chen cackled. Do you see the boss? If the opportunity comes, aggro it, even if it costs you your life, Yishu said. That must be done, Wei Chen replied. That's good then. Now that I think about it, isn't your existence worthless right now, Wei Chen said. How uncultured. When the time comes, I can come out and make a stand. Just my head and name will gather lots of attention, Yishu said. Wei Chen went silent for a long time. He couldn't help but admit that this was true and sighed. Minnesota, you really are sh*t. Everything went as they had predicted. The 8 guilds made a post for proof. The more witnesses the better. They quickly announced the competition and all spectators were welcome. The players knew the competition would be between the top experts of each guild. Even though they weren't pro-level players, they were still far better than everyone else. They were also easy to find in the game and were a sort of grassroots celebrities. Observe the areas under each guild's control. We'll have an order in which we stir up trouble, so we should do some research, Yi Shu said. Have the ones who lose cause trouble, Wei Chen immediately understood. I'll be watching them. Wait for my message, Yi Shu said. I'm not ready yet. Don't rush it, Wei Chen hurried with his work. And that's my fault, Yi Shu was speechless. Aren't you a god? Wei Chen began arguing again. Chapter 534, Venomous Flies. The entrance to the arena in every major city of the heavenly domain suddenly became bustling with noise. After the surrounding players found out about the news, all of them ran to the arena to watch the competition. Every week, pro players provided matches for everyone to watch, but what about these guild experts? Even though they were closer to normal players, very few had really seen them play in PvP matches. Now that the news had come out, some people went to cheer for their guild seniors. Some went to see what the noise was all about. Some took the opportunity to make bets. All sorts of people came to the arena, joining a single room. The room quickly filled up with people. The 8 guilds intentionally waited for the spectators to arrive. Seeing that there were enough people, they began the competition. They had thrown dice beforehand to determine the order and knew the results. The first match would be between Misty Castle and Herb Garden. The experts of the two sides were already standing on stage. Meanwhile, Yi Shu borrowed Chen Guo's computer to watch. He wasn't interested in the fights. From time to time he would glance at her screen, while typing to Wei Chen, what if it comes to Blue Brook Guild? Will you be under any pressure? Nonsense. Of course. Can't you see that I'm part of Blue Brook Guild? If I get kicked out of the guild, it'll be a huge loss for me. You should know the benefits of being part of a big guild, Wei Chen replied. You really are shameless, Yi Shu disdained. This is called competitive integrity. If you see excellent era, would you go easy because of your memories with them? Wei Chen said. That depends on who I meet, Yi Shu said. Wei Chen didn't believe him. Afterwards, Yi Shu continued to glance at the matches from time to time, but most of his attention was traveling around Poison Fang Swamp. He had to avoid the 8 guilds, but he also didn't want to stray too far from the boss. Poison Fang Swamp was very quiet today. The 8 guilds were afraid of outsiders interfering, so while waiting for the results of the competition, they didn't reveal the boss's whereabouts. The heavenly domain was huge. Trying to find it through pure luck wasn't very logical. As for the other guilds, even if they got their hands on this information, when they saw the attitudes of the 8 guilds, they knew that trying to join in now was already too late. It wouldn't be good to provoke them. In the arena, the 8 guilds didn't play according to all of the pro scene's rules. If they did, it would take way too long and they didn't have such time to waste. As a result, they only played team competitions to determine the winner with the same rules as the pro scene. 5 versus 5 with 1 substitute each. Because the competition had been quickly devised and set in motion, the map was chosen randomly, so neither side would have any tactical advantage. After fighting back and forth several times, Misty Castle finally couldn't hold on any longer and Herb Garden won the first match. Even though Misty Castle was somewhat disappointed, they weren't suffering. If they had fought for the boss the normal way, their chances of taking the boss was very small anyways, so it wasn't hard accepting their defeat. Misty Castle lost, Yi Shu told Wei Chen. I don't think we should act yet. Wait a moment. We can still do a bit more preparing. Wait for an unexpected result. That would be the perfect time to act. Wei Chen was extremely dirty. Wait for my next message. Yi Shu didn't say anything more. Next was Blue Brook Guild versus Tyrannical Ambition. Tyrannical Ambition lost. Zhang Yu was the first to propose the plan. Even though the plan had already gone this far, everyone was still a bit hesitant. Seeing how quickly Tyrannical Ambition had been eliminated, they finally began to believe that Zhang Yu didn't have any ulterior motives. Zhang Yu laughed and expressed the acknowledgement of their defeat. Excellent Dynasty versus Blossom Valley. Excellent Dynasty won. Samsara vs. Void Walk. Samsara won. 4 guilds were eliminated. None of them were too surprising. The 4 matches ended relatively quickly. Even so, an hour had already passed. Wei Chen worked busily making preparations during that hour. The next round of matches between the 4 surviving guilds began. Enough people had come as witnesses for their matches, so they decided to hurry up with the matches and played both at once. Samsara vs. Herb Garden. Excellent Dynasty vs. Blue Brook Guild. The first match ended with Samsara beating Herb Garden, which was certainly a surprise. When the results came out, the spectators immediately dispersed and went to watch the other match. Chen Guo also went along. The other match quickly ended too. This time, Blue Brook Guild lost. "We can act now," Yi Shu messaged Wei Chen. "What's the situation?" "Herb Garden, Blue Brook Guild," Yi Shu said. "My god, Blue Brook Guild? Are you serious?" Wei Cen asked. "Competitive integrity," Yi Shu reminded. *CK it. "Let's go," Wei Chen replied. By this time, the 8 guilds had already stopped scouting around. They had confirmed no outsiders had come to cause trouble and returned to guard the boss. Wei Chen had finished his preparations. It had been a busy hour. Getting the monsters to gather towards a desired direction wasn't an easy task. The one advantage Wei Chen had was the gang of bros beside him. He could lead them step by step. If they failed, he could personally step in and fix the situation. Yi Shu finally sent him the go-ahead. Wei Chen picked out a few people and had them begin their task. His gang was impatient to move. When they heard the order, they nearly let out a cheer. They controlled their characters and threw insect-repellent smoke from their pockets towards the direction that Wei Chen had forced them to memorize. After throwing the insect repellent, they heard a buzz that boomed like thunder. A huge swarm of venomous flies took flight. Countless venomous flies flew out from the swamp away from the insect repellent. The flies seemed to cover the skies as they moved towards a single direction. Where else could they fly? The insect repellent smoke was in every other direction. In order to get away from the repellent, they had to fly away. The loud buzzing frightened the guild players ahead. When they looked up, they turned pale with fright. *CK, where'd all these venomous flies come from? The venomous flies moved swiftly and arrived in an instant. Wei Chen's bros had already hidden themselves amongst the guild and threw a bit more insect repellent. Players who came to Poison Fang Swamp often brought insect repellent smoke. It was used very frequently too. Even if they hadn't done this, they probably wouldn't have gotten caught in any case because everyone else was doing the same thing. Insect repellent smoke might be effective, but no matter how much the guild players used at this time, they wouldn't get the desired effect. Insect repellent smoke was just something the insects didn't like, it didn't kill the insects. If the insect repellent smoke surrounded the venomous flies, the flies would buzz around randomly like houseflies. They wouldn't receive any damage. If the player walked too close, the flies would still lock their aggro. Players unaware of this bit of knowledge now learn their lesson through their own flesh and blood. One bro threw out some insect repellent, but the repellent surrounded these venomous flies. The flies began flying around randomly and a few still headed towards him. Who knew how many flies came at him, but this bro quickly fell to the ground. This was one reason small monsters like these were scary. Because of their small size, they could fly and attack all at the same time, allowing them to cover a wide area. This was one reason why Yi Shu and Wei Chen chose to use this tactic. If they had been goblins, no matter how many goblins there were, they wouldn't be much of a threat. It was the same theory behind surrounding bosses. Even if you had thousands of troops, only a few could get close enough to the boss, no? These flies avoided this issue. They could cover above, below, left, right, all around, while attacking the player. No matter how little damage they did, with so many of them, they would certainly be able to kill. These venomous flies did quite a lot of damage too. The players were level 70. The flies were level 65. The level difference wasn't significant enough to save them. Moreover, their attacks had a chance to poison. The corpse of the dead player had turned green. One person had died instantly, making the others extremely frightened. The second to face the flies was a knight, who instinctively raised his shield. Constant blocking noises could be heard from the venomous flies crashing into his shield. It sounded very comforting, but the knight himself wasn't looking good. Just because the shield blocked the flies didn't mean that the knight wasn't taking any damage. The shield only reduced damage. With so many flies, the blocking noise continued to echo and the knight's health fell rapidly. In fright, the knight shouted for the clerics to help him. When he looked back, the clerics had also been surrounded by venomous flies. These venomous flies automatically attacked and wouldn't only attack a single target. They had each found their own targets. Players who only had one fly targeting them weren't afraid, but with everyone packed together so closely, the flies would eventually get them. The swarm of venomous flies had come from nowhere, catching everyone off guard. Many players instantly died. The remaining hastily moved into a defensive formation. The flies wouldn't be enough to wipe out their entire group. The news of being ambushed quickly reached their guild leaders' ears. The ambushed guild happened to be the guild that was just about to enter the deciding match, Samsara. What? Samsara's guild leader 3 World 6 Paths became furious and immediately became suspicious of Herb Garden, who had just been defeated by Samsara. When a big guild lost a big opportunity, it was hard not to be resentful. When he thought of the initial agreement from every guild, Herb Garden's response had been somewhat reluctant. Now, his guild had been ambushed by venomous flies. Of course. After all, the agreement was up for everyone to see, so it wasn't possible to attack directly, so they made an indirect attack instead. Despicable. 3 World 6 Paths cursed in anger. The other guild leaders also received the news and immediately knew who 3 Worlds was angry at. Zhang Yu, who had proposed the idea, hastily said in defense, 3 Worlds, don't be rash. We don't know the whole situation yet. All 8 guilds cleared the field together. There couldn't have been a problem. If it wasn't us, then who could it be? The venomous flies couldn't have just happened to all come out and attack them. Even the noobs of the 10th server would laugh. 3 World 6 Paths spat. Zhang Yu was just about to respond, when he suddenly received more news. His own guild had been attacked by venomous flies and Blue Brook Guild had already started fighting the boss. Chapter 535, Fierce Mantis. This piece of news surprised Zhang Yu. He still wanted to calmly figure out what exactly had happened, but the other guilds had already begun stamping their feet in anger. Tyrannical Ambition wasn't the only one who had been attacked by a swarm of venomous flies. All of the guilds had been thrown into disorder. The sudden ambush by the venomous flies wasn't easy to deal with. Is this the so-called peaceful way? 3 World 6 Realms couldn't sit still once he learned that Blue Brook Guild had started fighting the boss. His guild hadn't been eliminated yet and now someone had already caused a ruckus. Did this mean everything before had been for naught? How could he stay calm? Excellent Dynasty was in a similar mood. They had also won 2 matches in a row and were one of the 4 remaining guilds in the competition. When they heard about the disturbance, they immediately denounced Blue Brook Guild too. Apart from them, Misty Castle, Void Walk, Blossom Valley had truly hoped that this would be a peaceful way of determining the owner of the boss in the future. Seeing such an act of betrayal, they naturally felt extremely angry and also lashed out at Blue Brook Guild. They did it in the public chat too, directly exposing the misdeed to all of the spectators watching the deciding match. The spectators heard the news and also went into an uproar. Blue Brook Guild immediately became the target of a rain of arrows. Yi Shu saw the situation from Chen Guo's screen and felt somewhat disapproving. He sent Wei Chen's Windward Formation a message, don't you think that pretending Blue Brook Guild is fighting the boss feels a bit too fake? All of them can confirm it. This approach is too stupid. It's not realistic at all. Hehe, you have to link it with the actual circumstances. When something like this happens, it can easily be explained, but for some reason, Blue Brook Guild's guild leader Changing Spring seems to have some sort of mental block towards typing words. If you want this guy to give an explanation to dissolve the situation, it's not going to happen, Wei Chen replied. Yi Shu was speechless. He didn't think Wei Chen would be so merciless to Blue Brook Guild. He truly deserved to be considered one of the most shameless pros in the competitive scene. You truly have no sense of kindness, Yi Shu sighed. As they discussed this with each other, the situation had already devolved into a complete mess. Nearly all of the 8 guilds had been ambushed by venomous flies at this point and had no time to deal with each other. They could only watch with eyes dripping with blood as Swamp Hunger Lepu pounced on Blue Brook Guild. As for Blue Brook Guild, they had no idea what was going on. The venomous flies didn't attack them. At first, they felt lucky and put up their guard. Who knew the other guilds had already put the blame on them and were looking at them with murderous intention? Finally, Blue Brook Guild encountered an attack, but it wasn't by venomous flies. It was by the boss. For the other guilds, this completely confirmed the conspiracy theory. If it weren't for the venomous flies attacking them, the other guilds would have already started attacking Blue Brook Guild. In reality, Blue Brook Guild had no idea the boss would suddenly charge at them. It seemed like someone had accidentally attacked or entered the boss's aggro range. The problem was in this mess, no one had been paying attention. Who was it? The team leader even asked, but the boss wasn't going to wait for them to talk. Swamp Hunter Lepu. An assassin and thief dual class. His movements were incredibly swift. He took a single step and became a blur. In an instant, he appeared in front of Blue Brook Guild's bossing team. He lifted up his two hands and pulled out two daggers. One of them was held in an upright position, while the other was held in reverse. He stabbed with one dagger and slashed with the other, sending two people tumbling backwards. Blue Brook Guild has started attacking the boss. Someone suddenly yelled from nearby. We didn't, Blue Brook Guild's team leader immediately yelled. He clearly realized pulling the boss in this situation was a very serious problem. Blue Brook Guild set up venomous flies to attack us and is now taking the opportunity to kill the boss. Blue Brook Guild is too despicable. Shouts of criticism came ceaselessly. The team leader of Blue Brook Guild was sweating like mad. The top core experts in the guild were peak experts and had gone to the arena to fight. The team leader had been left here and now encountered a difficult problem. In his panic, he hastily asked the guild leader for help. How could he know the guild leader was in an even worse situation than he was? He was drowning in spittle right now. Everyone retreat. Do not attack back. The team leader didn't receive a reply from his guild leader, so he could only give instructions on his own. He told his guild members not to touch the boss to prove their good faith. But who was Swamp Hunter Lepu? A wild boss. Standing there and take a beating and not attacking back wasn't something he would understand. If the clerics started healing the injured, the boss would immediately switch targets to the clerics. Even if the clerics healed each other to tank the boss, they wouldn't last very long. Under this vicious cycle, the team would get wiped out. If they didn't attack back, they would prove their good faith. It might be effective, but against Swamp Hunter Lepu, they would certainly die in order to prove this point. The team leader never said clearly if this was his intention. The team members didn't plan on sacrificing their lives for principle. If they couldn't fight back, then what else could they do other than run? As a result, they began to retreat. They didn't fight back, but by running, it looked like they were trying to move the boss away from all of the other guilds. Were they trying to prove their good faith, or did they have other evil schemes in mind? They want to leave. The other guilds, who were still busy fending off venomous flies, saw what was happening and thought their true objective was to pull the boss away. Blue Brook Guild is about to pull the boss away. Guild leader, do we kill them or not? Guild leader, kill or not? At this moment, the guild leaders saw the news and became furious. Everything had already reached this stage. Who would listen to Changing Spring's excuses? Samsara's 3 world 6 paths directly left. Excellent Dynasty's Chen Yahui quickly followed suit. On the other hand, the other guilds were in a bit of a predicament though. According to their agreement, Samsara or Excellent Dynasty should be the ones to kill Swamp Hunter Lepu. Even though someone had broken the agreement first, if they used this opportunity to fight for the boss, they wouldn't be any different from the original betrayer. With so many spectators as proof of their losses in the previous matches, it wouldn't be appropriate to fight the boss. They didn't dare to act rashly in this type of situation. Was Blue Brook Guild really that shish *tty? Everyone mumbled to themselves, but none of them would say it out loud. They had already lost their opportunity to kill the boss. In any case, it would be better to watch the events unfold. Why should they speak up for Blue Brook Guild? Even if one day everyone found a peaceful way to walk on, thoughts of hoping the other side would fall would always stay. Deep down, everyone knew a peaceful way of competing for objectives was just an ideal. The reason for their temporary agreement wasn't the norm. Against a god like Lord Grimm and the eye-catching heavenly justice, they had to give them their attention. None of them truly had much good faith towards each other. Kill. 3 world 6 paths was the first to give the order. He had taken a huge mental blow and felt like he had been duped. Right now, it was either the fish died or the net split. Even if his guild couldn't get the boss, he would make sure Blue Brook Guild suffered. 3 world 6 paths could be hot-blooded at times. He wasn't someone who only planned carefully and meticulously. With his personality and in this sort of battle, the morale he could muster up was frightening. Nothing else mattered but to kill. Samsara was the first to be hit by the venomous flies and had suffered a few losses, but they were also the first to stabilize the situation. Anyone who came to kill the wild boss would naturally be the guild's elites. A disturbance like this wasn't something that would stop them. Even though they hadn't completely cleared away the venomous flies, when they received their guild leader's order, several of them took up their weapons and charged towards Blue Brook Guild's players. Brothers, forward! Kill those despicable, shameless Blue Brook Guild dogs, Samsara's team leader roared and took the lead. His face had already been torn apart and his voice didn't sound pleasant. At the same time, 3 World Six Paths gave a reply on the post on their agreement. He announced that Blue Brook Guild would reap the consequences for going back on their word. Samsara had been tricked and they weren't going to tolerate it. Fight! Your Blue Brook Guild might be one of the 3 great guilds, but our Samsara isn't afraid. Today, we'll teach you a lesson. It was very rare for a guild leader to make a declaration. With how the club guilds operated, even though there had been many conflicts across all servers, no one had ever made such a powerful statement. Let alone challenging a stronger guild, it wasn't wise to do so from a business perspective either. 3 World Six Paths reply was picked out and made as a post. Supporters gathered together, not just Samsara fans, but the neutral fans also stood by Samsara. Team Blue Rain fans didn't know the truth, and with just the revelations given by the spectators, they had no way of justifying their guild's actions. Kill. In Poison Fang Swamp, Samsara charged at Blue Brook Guild, who were still trying to prove that they weren't attacking the boss. How could they have known the others thought they were trying to pull the boss away? When they saw Samsara suddenly rushing at them, they once again panicked. Samsara was smart too. They only attacked Blue Brook Guild and didn't aggro the boss. Swamp Hunter Lepu would only focus on Blue Brook Guild and would act as a helper to Samsara. F***CK, what are you guys going? Blue Brook Guild's team leader still wanted to try explaining the situation, but Samsara directly chopped him to pieces and turned him into a corpse. Samsara shouted their resentment and went berserk. Blue Brook Guild no longer had a leader and fell into disarray. They formed small groups and defended against the attack. The other guilds had stabilized their teams, but because they had lost the matches in the arena, their guild leaders ordered them not to interfere. However, one guild was different. Excellent Dynasty had stabilized themselves after the venomous fly ambush, but didn't directly charge forward like Samsara. They simply smiled as they watched Blue Brook Guild get slaughtered. Samsara brothers. Our Excellent Dynasty has a share of this boss. Excellent Dynasty's team leader felt like very pleased with their circumstances. Okay, come. Even if you two both fight together, our Samsara isn't afraid. Samsara's players didn't plan on stopping. Excellent Dynasty was surprised. What a fierce Mantis. After finishing off the snake, the Mantis was also planning on taking down the Oriole.